Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another meeting of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and on behalf of my co-host, Phil Bossman, we'd like to welcome you all here this evening. Tonight, we're excited to be talking about ScriptRunner with our guest, Heiko Brenn. So we're going to welcome him in 1 second here. I'd just like to remind everybody, if you're watching this at home, please take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/rtpsug. We have meetings twice a month, and we record all our content. We have about 95 videos in our contact catalog. So if you're looking for PowerShell content on how to do infra ops or things related to applications and enterprise operations, definitely take a look at our catalog. There's probably something there for you. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome in our guest speaker tonight. Hey, Heiko. There we go. I messed it up already. Hey, Heiko, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Mike? Doing good.
I'm doing well. Hey, Phil, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well as well. So I appreciate Heiko for certainly staying up really late and joining this group. We're certainly glad to have you from halfway across the world, close enough to halfway across the world now.
Yes. So for those of you who may not be aware, because you're watching this as on a recording, Heiko is in Germany. Our group is based in North Carolina, and it's 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But for Heiko, it is approximately 2:40 in the morning, and he's been generous enough to stay up late with us to present his product to us. So first of all, thank you for staying up late with us. We appreciate that.
So I kind of wanted to talk about, and then the idea that, how did you kind of get into this, whole PowerShell thing? And give us a quick little background. You don't need to do 10 minutes, but how are we doing?
Yeah, okay. So I'm in the IT industry for almost 30 years. I started as an administrator with mainframes and IBM PS2 models, and so I'm old. Then I did consulting and stuff like that. And my first experience with PowerShell was with Exchange 2007. And I have to say it was not really love at first sight, because I had a couple of servers, and then I had to change the ports of some SMTP connectors. And I thought, well, I go to the GUI and I'm doing it. And then I was learning that it's not possible anymore. I have to use this thing called PowerShell. And then first I was like, okay, I can do it. And then, of course, a few days later, of course, it's like, okay, I had to do things on multiple servers at the same time. And then it was like, okay, it kind of clicked and said, okay, that's a cool thing. So I can really do this stuff in a much easier way now that I have a script or a one-liner to do that. And from there, I used it quite frequently. I was in the security, working for a security software company, and we had a PowerShell module as well to manage that. And then I joined ScriptRunner actually 2.5 years ago, and now I'm let's say fully into PowerShell, so to speak. But I'm still of course on a very beginner level, I would say. So it's great. That's what I just mentioned about the community. It's great to see what people are doing and able to do with PowerShell, and to be part of that is really awesome. It's really fun.
Yes, once you find the love for PowerShell, it's like a happy marriage, and going, all right, this is my baby now. We're gonna it's gonna give back to me just as much as I give back to it.
What we were saying prior to starting this recording tonight, that we wanted to say thank you to ScriptRunner. They've always been a big supporter of the PowerShell community. It's really great to see a company helping user groups like ourselves and others get their feet wet and get themselves started by supporting user groups and being able to help them put content online. So we appreciate that very much. Question about ScriptRunner itself. I think this is a product that most people have heard of the name, because ScriptRunner is very active in the community, but a lot of people may not actually know what it does. So if you had to give me like the 30-second elevator pitch, what is ScriptRunner, and what's the problem that it solves?
Okay, so ScriptRunner is based on PowerShell, and the idea of ScriptRunner is really to simplify the way you develop, manage, and delegate PowerShell scripts. And that all starts with centralizing all the different bits and pieces that you need to successfully run your scripts. That's what I'm going to show you also later on. It's like the scripts, the modules, the credentials, and really enable also non-IT experts to kind of use PowerShell, maybe without even knowing it, because we're hiding all the complexity and the things, the technical stuff in the background, and people can just do their job, spin up a new VM, starting an onboarding process or whatever, and ScriptRunner takes care of all the logistics in the background.
So this is a challenge that's a product for a challenge that's near and dear to my heart. As we started this meeting some time ago this evening, Phil and I were talking, and I have this exact problem in my environment right now. So I work on a team that works with a lot of automation, and we write a fair amount of scripts. And my team is obviously very comfortable in writing and executing those scripts. And now we're being asked to start to automate tasks for things like help desk and service desk people, for onboarding and offboarding. And they sort of say, find the top 5 tasks that you can automate for a team, but they never think about how is that team going to execute those tasks if they don't really have any real world experience with PowerShell or execution or remote execution or access on remote machines. So this is a challenge I have right now for myself. So I'm very interested to hear about this. Maybe we should stop there and let you sort of take over with your natural start there. Phil, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get started this evening?
No, I think it's a great natural start, and that is really the whole point. It seems like so much of us at this point are able to write scripts and consume scripts for ourselves, but it is that natural, or it is that progression. Is like, can you then take the next step and give a script to somebody else, give them the next tool? And I'm really interested to see how ScriptRunner is allowing us to do that. So take it away.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I have a few slides in the beginning, and then I'm going to switch to my demo environment so we can really take a look at how the product actually works and how it looks like and what are the things that we can do with it. So yeah, first of all, thanks again for giving me the opportunity to talk about our solution and about make PowerShell a real solution in 5 steps, which kind of is kind of a provocative thing maybe to say, okay, because you might say PowerShell is already a solution, which is true when it comes to the foundation and the technology and the stuff that you can do. But I want to show you what you could do with it when you use ScriptRunner together with PowerShell and really kind of, yeah, just do more with it. So the 2 things I want to talk about, the question number 1 is, okay, why does it make sense to think about this solution that ScriptRunner stuff? And then it's about, okay, how we actually use that and what's the benefit of all that. Before we start, at the end of this session, we're going to give away 2 Amazon gift cards, and it's going to happen in a way that I'm going to ask 2 questions, and for each question, the first person who is first in typing in the right answer in the chat is going to win a gift card. Okay, so if you take anything away, maybe it's going to be a gift card at the end, which is also not too bad. And then, okay, short introduction. So as I said, we are into PowerShell management. It's about simplifying all the management and the way you manage, you develop and delegate PowerShell scripts. Here you see part of our team. We are based in Germany, and so this is me. You can hit me on Twitter. You can on LinkedIn. You can even call me if you want to. You can write me an email. And as mentioned, we are really supporting the community and people who are maybe also starting to use PowerShell. And one of the things that we offer and that you can get from us is a PowerShell poster, a PowerShell cheat sheet, which you can put on your office wall or your home office wall maybe at the moment. And it shows you things like, okay, how does the Active Directory module work? How does the pipeline work? How can I use or access WMI and stuff like that? So you can go to our website and register there, and we'll send it to you. And it's really helpful. It's like let's say the get help that you can put on your office wall. All right. So the problem that we solve or the things that we see as a challenge, and we already talked a little bit about that just before I started the presentation here, is really if we look at how PowerShell is being used in many organizations, maybe it might look a little bit like this picture. It's like, I call it a decentralized PowerShell landscape. So you have your scripts and you wrote them and you know exactly which one to use when you want to spin up a VM or create a new user or create a new SharePoint site or whatever. And that's perfectly fine because it's your scripts, right? But the question then maybe becomes like, okay, where is the latest script? What can I do? Or how could I give this to somebody else to really maybe also run that script? And another thing that we experience quite often is no matter how small or big an organization is, there are always maybe a handful of people that are really into PowerShell. And so outside of this group of people, it's really kind of difficult if you think about people in help desk or, of course, in the line of business. And another thing that we see, of course, is that to manage and to use PowerShell in a secure way, of course, there needs to be a secure credential management on an org-wide level. And now, yes, we have the secrets management module that also helps. But in general, having these security things being configured in a way that you can really use it on an enterprise level is something that is a challenge many times. And so as a result, you have your scripts, you write the scripts, you run the scripts, all the great stuff that you do, but it's still limited to really to you guys and girls who are actively working with PowerShell. And from our perspective, this really means that the real potential of PowerShell remains untapped, which means using this technology to really do things maybe for your whole organization. So the idea is to change from this picture to maybe something like this, where it is well organized and you know exactly where to go to if you want to do something. And so it's about standardization to make sure everybody has the right scripts. It happens always in exactly the same way. It's also, of course, then one of the main things here is to really to centralize all the different components that you need to be able to run PowerShell, and of course to do this in a secure way. Because we talk about people outside of the IT expert circle, it has to be easy. It has to be accessible in an easy way, and so. From a high-level perspective, it's like, okay, we want to transfer something like this into something like this that you see on the right side, so that at the end, it's just an input form. And so nobody needs to know who's using that. Nobody needs to know that there's PowerShell in the background or maybe there's ScriptRunner in the background. It's just an input form to get things done. This is an out-of-office example. Could be anything that you're doing with PowerShell. And so that's kind of really the idea, and one of the important things to really kind of, if you will, democratize PowerShell, these crazy little buzzwords. And because we're centralizing all the different bits and pieces, we have very good possibilities to monitor all the activities to find out, okay, which script ran at what time, how long did it take, was there an issue? And we will see that, of course, there are different ways to run the scripts. One is like what we just saw as an example. There could be an input form, so it's an interactive way of using it. The other one could be, of course, having scheduled approaches for housekeeping processes and stuff like that. And all these activities can be monitored centrally, as well as the things that when we talk about integration, where you want to enable other systems to also trigger scripts via a REST API. And so all this information and all these activities are ending up in a centralized dashboard, so you have an overview about all this stuff that goes on in the background. And so the question is, okay, how do we actually achieve that? And it all starts with the scripts and the modules. So step one is all the scripts and modules are stored in a central place. Which also means, of course, you could have GitHub, TFS, Azure DevOps going on in the background. And I can see that funny little AC/DC song names just now. Very good. So you could synchronize your scripts with Git or TFS. So let's say your code management goes on in GitHub, for example, and once a script is being moved to the production branch, and it automatically becomes available for ScriptRunner. So step one, as I said, we have all the scripts, we have all the modules, and again, depending on where you are on your PowerShell journey, we also provide hundreds of scripts on our GitHub repo. We call them action packs, and we'll show you that also when we switch to the demo environment. You will find, I think it's 1,500 something scripts for all kinds of platforms, all kinds of use cases: Active Directory, Exchange, Office 65, Azure, Citrix, whatever. And you can just take them, download them, modify them to your needs. You can also see how we then write the scripts, which is basically based on the best practice approach by Microsoft. And so this might also be interesting for you to get some info on that. Okay, so we have the scripts and the modules. The second step is, okay, we need to have, of course, the credentials to create established sessions to the backend systems. And so what happens if we use ScriptRunner together with PowerShell? The only instance that's running scripts is the ScriptRunner server, which means only ScriptRunner needs to have access to the backend systems, no matter if it's on premises or hybrid or in the cloud. It also means only ScriptRunner needs to have the possibility to use the credentials. This in itself, of course, already simplifies, again, the whole way of how you use PowerShell, and also the aspects of how, okay, on how many machines I have to enable PowerShell and stuff like that. And on the other side, if we look at the users right here, that might be somebody in help desk, or maybe some administrators, or maybe even some end users. These people right here, they could be just stay normal domain user, but based on the delegation within ScriptRunner, they might be able to do things in Azure, on Office 65, in Citrix, in SQL, or whatever. But the users don't need to have any access to these systems, and they don't need to have any permissions in these systems, because everything is managed within ScriptRunner. And so is the delegation. So in ScriptRunner, you decide what kind of use cases, what kind of tasks a person is able to start and work with. And talking about the credentials, they can be stored in two ways. One is they can be stored in the Windows Credential Store on the ScriptRunner machine. And the second way of using and storing credentials is using password servers. And at the moment, we support 3 of them: CyberArk, Pleasant, and Psychotic. And so in this case, if there is a script that wants to connect to Office 65, then ScriptRunner is going to ask the password server for the credential in real time at this point in time. And then we establish the session, we run the scripts, and once that's all done, then the password information is not stored anywhere. It just stays in the password vaults. And so that's, on one hand, of course, makes the whole process even more secure, and you even more centralize the whole process, which becomes in handy, of course, if you think about maybe you might have not just one ScriptRunner instance, but maybe 2 or 3 or 5. And you definitely don't want to maintain the credentials on each and every box individually. And so that's why this password server support really, of course, is a very important topic here. And
so Heiko, can I jump in there for a second? So I love where this is going already. This looks fantastic. So you mentioned earlier on about credential support, and there is the secret management module. Is there any chance in the future that ScriptRunner will support the use of the secret management module that's provided by PowerShell?
Yes. We already have an experimental implementation in the solution. We started pretty early when the first versions came out, and then a lot of things got changed architectural wise, so we have to kind of rebuild the stuff. But at the moment, we have I would say an early version of it, not officially supported, but there will be support for that, which of course then in turn gives possibility to support other key vaults that are connections that are being written by the community and supporting Azure Key Vault and stuff like that. Yes.
Okay, and so I understand that you have sort of an order that you're probably looking to go through your presentation with, so that makes sense. We have some questions that are coming in that may not fit with where you are now, but someone's wondering, like, does ScriptRunner have a cross-platform support now that PowerShell is cross-platform? So can you execute scripts in ScriptRunner against Linux nodes?
Yes.
And maybe you want to answer that later, but that's just something that someone's asking about.
It's absolutely fine. No, so the answer is yes. So we support PowerShell 7. So you can have SSH keys as the credentials, and so you can use ScriptRunner to manage also your Linux and macOS machines. Yes, absolutely.
So in that same regard, is effectively ScriptRunner becomes your script runner, quote unquote, is that it proxies all your scripts for it. So you would then, dump the all your script repositories into this, and then you basically have it do all the automation for you. And then there's some web UI, I guess it's web UI, or can you just call this even through other like APIs, like, hey, call this, let me do this. And I saw, or I heard earlier that there's, hey, some automation. I mean, like scheduler. So, hey, you have this job, just run and just send me a job kind of thing. Yeah. So it's more than just do this on these ad hoc tasks that I want you to do, but it's keep my monitoring.
Yes, absolutely. So we have this three way of executing scripts, right? One is the interactive one. The second one is really having a scheduled process, which is quite interesting because many companies come to us where their priority one is really to kind of get rid of these decentralized Windows task scheduler that go on all over the place, and they never know does it really run or not. And so they start with centralizing this first, and then maybe there's interactive stuff come into the picture, or then using the REST API. And it's exactly like you said. When we take all these three approaches together, it's like ScriptRunner becomes the centralized hub for all PowerShell activities. So, which of course also means that if there is something you need to debug and to analyze, okay, it's all happening on ScriptRunner, which actually also happens if you have like third-party systems that have some kind of PowerShell functionality, but typically means that, okay, I have to put the scripts over there and I have to make sure that the credentials are over there. And then it becomes complex with more and more systems. So let's say in our ideal world, so to speak, really ScriptRunner is this centralized hub for everything that has to do with PowerShell, running with the scripts, the modules, the credentials, creating this web user interface, but also, of course, managing the scheduled tasks and the fully automated REST API connectors.
All right, so we sort of interrupted you here for a second, and there are more questions coming, and I think what I want to do is I want to batch them together so that you can get through some of the intro material that you're looking to cover, and then just keep in mind that there are questions about running it in distributed environments, running between different versions of POSH 5 and 7, running it in Kubernetes and stuff. So I want to let you get back to your presentation, but keep in mind, we'll queue up some more questions, and maybe we'll take another pause in like 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll get through some of the questions.
Excellent. And by then we're going to be in the solution, so I can show you all these things, how it's actually configured. Just to finish up the security stuff here, I also want to mention that because we have always this, and we had the discussion just before we started the session, right? It's about PowerShell and security, and there is a PowerShell ebook, PowerShell security ebook that you also can download from our website. It's 140 something pages ebook, and it covers all the built-in PowerShell security stuff, things we like Chia, how to handle, how to store credentials, all the stuff you can you read in this ebook. So it's also, I think it's quite helpful if you're especially in this area and you want to make sure, okay, you use PowerShell in the most secure way possible, then that security ebook, I think, is a good starting point. All right, so we have the scripts, we have the modules, we have the credentials. We know that permissions are only necessary to between the ScriptRunner instance and the backend system, and the user's delegation is independent from that. And then it's really about making it easy for the users, and that's where the next step comes into the picture, where we automatically transform your scripts into a web user interface. And by looking into the scripts, the synopsis, where we hopefully find some parameter descriptions because they automatically become part of this user interface. We look at the param block. Are there mandatory parameters? Do we have datetime parameters, which we automatically translate into a datetime picker? Do we have parameters that contain regex? So we check this as well. And that's all that happens fully automatically. So there's no need to write any UI code. And as a result, user interface might look like this, which is one for creating a new team. Where in the background, if you look at the new team command, that has dozens of other parameters, which we don't see, because here the idea is the user only sees which really needs the attention of a user, where we need some input, where the user needs to select something. All the other stuff in the background, like security settings, like here in Teams, do we want to allow Giphies, private public channels, who are the owners and stuff like that. That can all be managed within ScriptRunner, but it's nothing that we need to show to the user, because based on the standardized approach, you decided, okay, that's our standard configuration. And so only the things that really needs to be interactive with the user, that's what we see here. And then step by step, other actions might become part for specific users. So some users might maybe have 5 actions, 10 actions, 15 actions, or whatever their job is. And then coming back to this integration part, really is, as I mentioned, running the things interactively is one possibility. The second one is the schedule part. And the third one is really enable any kind of restified solution, so to speak, to talk to ScriptRunner to tell us, okay, run this script with this parameters, with this parameter values. Of course, there needs to happen an authentication before that. And so REST, of course, REST is the preferred way of doing this. We also have an so-called email inbound connector, which means if you have like legacy systems that are not able to talk REST, but they can send emails in a particular formatted way, this could be another channel to communicate with ScriptRunner. Okay, so with this, I would switch to my demo environment, which is this one here. So here we're looking at our admin interface for ScriptRunner, and this is the dashboard. I'm coming back to this later. As I said, it all starts with the scripts. So here I have all the scripts that I can use on my ScriptRunner machine. It's like 1,200 scripts. And I mentioned this action packs on GitHub. So most of the scripts, because I'm a lazy person, are coming from these action packs. We can take a look at an example here, like, okay, creating a new team, for example. You can see how we create these scripts, which is based on the best practice approach. You can already maybe see here, we already add some additional functionality when it comes to multi-language support, which means if a user switches the language in our interface, the parameter descriptions also switch if you have this information in your scripts. So this is how you control what's actually displayed in the user interface. And then, of course, we have the parameter, the param block, the actual code. And right here, you already see we also add some additional functionality and information. For example, you can control what you want to display to the user once the script has been executed. We will see other examples where we, for example, we know the IP address from the machine where maybe a person has started an action, or the user information that you might want to use to control the behavior of your scripts, for example. And so here we have the scripts. You also might see here, we also detect if a script contains functions, which also means you can decide later on to maybe delegate the functionality of a whole script, or maybe just a function. And we can we heavily work with tagging and filtering. So you can say, okay, I only want to work with my Azure scripts, for example, or I want to have my Exchange scripts here. So as I said, the idea is really have to hold all the scripts in a single place, and to start using them and manage them centrally. Second step, credentials. So here we have the credentials for all the different backend systems that we want to connect to. And they can be stored locally on the Windows Credential Store, or like in this case, I have a credential for my local Exchange server, which is stored in Pleasant. So what happened is that instead of having the credential right here, it's just the ID of the credential. So ScriptRunner is going to take this ID, ask Pleasant when there is a script that wants to connect to Exchange, and get this information in real time when this session has to be established. And here we also see already we have this PowerShell sequence management implementation in an experimental version right now, but there will be, of course, an official one. And as I said, supporting PowerShell 7, you can also have your SSH keys here to be able to manage your Linux boxes as well. And so these are the credentials, and what we are going to do with this, we are mapping them to what we call targets, and targets are the actual backend systems that you want to talk to and want to manage. Let's say start again with this local Exchange server here. So a target means, okay, this is the address, this is how I'm connecting, this is where I want to connect to. And this is the credential here that is going to be used every time this target later on is used for any kind of action, as we call them, which means this logistic information doesn't have to be in your scripts because it's managed as targets in your script. So no need to have any credentials there. And the nice thing here, of course, about this, you can have all kinds of different targets. So there could be targets for local execution, for PowerShell remoting. PowerShell remoting also, of course, includes if you have Chia endpoints that you want to connect there and then run the scripts from these Chia endpoints. You can combine targets into collections, which is especially helpful for this housekeeping processes. So if you have 200 servers that you want to do archiving or log deletion every Saturday, you don't have to select all these 200 in your configuration. You could put all them into a collection, say, okay, this is this collection I'm going to use for this housekeeping process. And then we have these examples here for the typically frequently used cloud targets. But of course, it's not limited to that. You can create targets for your VMware, for your Hyper-V system, for your SharePoint, for all kinds of backend systems. So for example, if I'm looking at Office 365 as an example here, you also can decide, okay, which kind of service I want to address actually. Is it just going to be Azure AD and Teams, or maybe is it also going to be something that I want to use the good old MS Online or Exchange, or am I going to use XOV2 already and I'm having already my certificates ready for doing the authentication here? Which all depends, of course, on your configuration and the way you want to use your scripts together with ScriptRunner. And the idea of having these targets really simplifies the whole process of what has to be part of your script. And the idea, if you do that with ScriptRunner, really is, okay, we're focusing on the business case, so to speak, and the logistics are being managed within ScriptRunner. And so, as I said, you can create all kinds of targets on-premise, hybrid, in the cloud. And so the question is, okay, what are we doing with this now? So we have the scripts, we have credentials, we have targets where we know that's the backend system, that's the credentials. And with this, we can start creating actions. And actions are the actual use cases. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to do with your scripts? And we can look at it as a simple example here, which could be create a new VM, for example. I'm just clicking here on run. And remember, I'm in the admin context right now. I'm not in the context of a help desk person or an end user. I will do that in a minute. So here we'll see, we obviously have a mandatory parameter. We can select what kind of operating system we want to build this VM where. We have the locations that we can select, and we have the VM sizes that is available here. The idea here is, of course, and we have queries here in the background that make sure that the user who is working with that is not able to spin up the most expensive VMs in a Azure region that might be somewhere in Asia, and your location is in North America, for example. So if I'm looking at this in an edit mode, we will see, number one, we have many different parameters that are pre-configured. For example, what's the resource group name? And we want to have always static IP addresses, for example. And this is something that we have decided, okay, that's the way we want to create our VMs, and then we hide that from the input form, which means users don't have to change it. If in another case, somebody should also be able to maybe select a resource group, then we could do this, of course, as well. And we have these queries enabled here, which means instead of, just disable this here, instead of just providing let me just do it again. Instead of just providing here an input form where you would need to know, okay, this is East US and this is, I don't know, standard D2, V2, whatever, which no other normal user in help desk would know. And because we're thinking about delegation, of course, we don't want people to type in stuff here, and especially not stuff that does things in the wrong way, right? So that's why we provide the possibilities here to enable these queries. And I'm going to show you how this queries looks like. And here, for example, we have a list of the VM sizes, and we also have a list of the possible locations. And so the thing might be, you have people sitting in North America, so they should be able to select the locations in North America, and others might sit in Europe, and they should be able to select the locations in Europe. Now, when you just have PowerShell, you would have to have this in your scripts, right? You might modify your scripts, or you might maybe even worse, maybe make copies of your scripts and have for different locations. In this case, the underlying script to actually create a VM is exactly staying the same. You're just changing the management, so to speak, about what the user is able to select, which means you could just make a copy of this action and saying, this is my action for North America, this is my action for Europe, and you might just have provide a different set of possible options for, in this case, the region and the VM sizes, for example. And now, if you have, so we have implemented that. Now, in the background, of course, we have this script, right? So I'm going to.
Can I ask a couple questions here, just coming along? So let's go back a little bit to targets and stuff like that. And so the idea with targets is that, so you can set different, the script runner is, I'm trying to like envision the environment as a whole. So the script runner is a virtual appliance that then reaches out to talk to different clients, but there's also an agent running on the local machine that can locally run scripts. Is that what it is? Like, I'm trying to, like, we kind of jumped right into the web interface, but bring me back to 10,000 foot and say, what's the architecture?
Okay, So you have a VM, a Windows VM with an IIS running ScriptRunner on top of this, having the modules there, having the scripts there, and what you're doing is you have your ScriptRunner and machine and enable them to connect to Azure, to Office 365, to Hyper-V, VMware, or whatever, based on the PowerShell connections, right? So to use the module, let's say the PowerCLI module, to connect to your vSphere server, for example, and then manage your VMs on that machine. So there is no need to have any agents on decentralized
so
machines.
I would then install PowerCLI on the ScriptRunner server so that I can talk to and then, hey, if I wanted to have it do, again, my world is Citrix and world. If I need to do talking to Citrix, I need to install those PowerShell modules into this ScriptRunner server to then talk to Citrix, as opposed to having another jump box that it's going to go, or some other target.
Yes, exactly. So in this case, you would install the Citrix Studio, which includes the PowerShell SDK. You would have this. You would include the PS snap-ins for Citrix, and then start using that to connect to your backend systems. That's kind of the first step approach. Now, we also have organizations that say, okay, we have, let's say, 20 different backend systems, and we don't want to have all the modules being part of the ScriptRunner machine. So in this case, what could happen is there is a separate box, like next to ScriptRunner, where all the modules are installed. And then the execution is being done via this jump box, and then talking to Citrix, talking to...
So in that case, most of your scripts are running toward that target, and that target then jumps to the next server. Or is it I'm still jumping to the other thing? Because some of the stuff I know I can jump into, like, another server and do that. I can jump to my vCenter server, I can jump to my vSphere, and then I can jump to the other servers, and even I can talk directly to Azure AD. But some of the things is like, well, other stuff I just want to query, dispix, that can talk directly to the server or to the target itself. So some of those kind of things, and like, where do I put the scripts locally? Sometimes do I put the script remotely, or everything needs to stay local and then it's going to start doing some delegation? Is that
the default concept? The default scenario really is typically the scripts are really local on the ScriptRunner machine, and then making sure ScriptRunner is able to connect to the target systems. Depending on the infrastructure, if the direct connection is not possible because you have a layered network and you have firewall policies and stuff like that, then the scenario could be that, okay, we are connecting for example, to a Chia endpoint, where from there the execution is being done, because that's the only way that it can be established, because it's not allowed to connect directly to the backend system. So these are things that typically really depend on the infrastructure design and how ScriptRunner is able to connect to this backend system. I mean, basically, at the end, it all comes back to what can you do natively with PowerShell, because the way that we connect with ScriptRunner is underneath. It's a PowerShell host, right? So everything that you can do with PowerShell, you can put into ScriptRunner and have it managed in a proper way on let's say on an enterprise level. So which also means that's coming back to if you have you're implementing something and it doesn't work in the ScriptRunner. So the first thing that we always recommend is, okay, try it natively on this machine, on your PowerShell console. Is it possible to connect to this system, and are you able to run that script against Azure or Office 365 or Teams or whatever? And so if that's possible, infrastructure-wise, then chances are very good that it also works within ScriptRunner.
So kind of related to that same fashion. Oh, sorry, my next question, Mike. The idea that the architecture of ScriptRunner, does it have multiple runners? Like if I needed to put something in Asia, and so that everything's running local in Asia, I can have a script runner in Asia and a script runner in North America, so that it does that stuff, and then I can centralize. I'm also kind of not following through some of that, like HA architecture long term.
Yeah. So So of course you can have a multiple ScriptRunner instances or ScriptRunner servers that kind of share a common configuration, for example, which brings us to load balancing, high availability scenarios, of course, or other scenarios which we also see sometimes where customers say, okay, we started with one machine and we have 50 actions for manual tasks, and we have now 80 actions that run scheduled, and then we have also REST API calls coming in, and we want to have a separation between the interactive actions and the ones that are being used for scheduled and REST API calls. So in this case, also you end up with two different, in this case, maybe two or maybe even more servers to make sure, okay, these ScriptRunner servers are there to provide the service for this interactive usage, and the other ones for the scheduled one and the REST API connector world.
But it would be a same web interface to actually control all of those.
Yes. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
so it sounds like maybe an easier way to say this is there's probably a preferred architecture, right? And then deviate from the preferred architecture based on client limitations, network limitations. But then I also heard here that, hey, when you start to get into a big deployment with a lot of runners and different nodes, maybe we need to load balance the system, and we have jobs being split up between multiple work boxes that ScriptRunner is controlling. So it sounds like we have an interface that we work on, and the interface is smart enough to delegate work to targets and boxes that do work in areas based on predefined choices that we make in our environment, and it manages that all from the scenes. So I wanted to, does that sound like a fairly good representation of how it works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, and I had a question from earlier, just to sort of verify. So the target, I understand that. The target sounds like a combination of a host, a user, and credentials, and maybe a protocol, right? So that's all sort of bundled together to call this thing called a target. And I would assume for environments like Active Directory and Exchange, you could have multiple targets targeting the same box based on what you need that target to do. So this target is able to run elevated commands. This target is used for lower commands, and that's sort of the idea there with the targets, right?
Yes. So if let's say if the configuration of let's say the ports could be different, or the way the modules you want to use, you could also say, okay, I'm creating a new target. Maybe let's go to this remoting example, for example, maybe. So here you can see, okay, maybe it's a standard remoting target that we want to create. And so, okay, of course I need an address. Somewhere I need a credential, of course. And then depending on how I can connect to this backend system, by default, okay, we would use WSMan, but you could also customize that and then saying, okay, I am really having particular endpoints that I'm going to address, which would be this GR example, for example, or a particular jump box where then you would start running the scripts from this machine, and then you can create an unlimited number of targets, and you can duplicate the targets and have for different jobs or for different actions or for different scripts. But typically, of course, the customers were trying to limit the number of targets based on how to manage that, which also brings us to an interesting aspect, because what might happen is you have one ScriptRunner machine, and then you have an Azure team, you have a SharePoint team, you have an Exchange team, and you want to make sure that the Azure guys are not messing up with the Exchange targets and the Exchange scripts and the Exchange credentials. So what you can do when you create any kind of object in ScriptRunner, you can say, okay, should that be available for every admin that is able to work with ScriptRunner, or should that be an object that is only there for the Azure team, for example? So that can be done for scripts, credentials, targets, queries, and actions. And so by doing that, you can really have this multi-team scenario with one single ScriptRunner machine, and still be sure that okay, these different teams are not messing up each other. Of course, you have to have at least one global admin who has access to everything, but you can have these multiple teams underneath, where then you really have this security that, okay, the Exchange guys are only seeing their Exchange scripts and Exchange actions and can work with them, and not kind of, I don't know, accidentally deleting an action or a script for the Azure team, for example.
So related to that actions kind of stuff, with, can you build up like actions that like reach into somebody's, GitHub repository and run scripts from there, so that the Azure team can manage their own effective scripts kind of thing, or they need to move their scripting model into ScriptRunner and keep their scripts there?
Yeah, so typically, when we talk about Git, this is one good example for having a scheduled action, which could be something like, let me just look at this one here. You can say, okay, I might have a action or a scheduled action here where I say, okay, I want to monitor a particular repo and maybe a particular branch, and want to make sure if some new scripts or updated scripts are stored there or coming up there, we want to use it in ScriptRunner. So we are constantly monitoring this repository and this branch, and then make it locally available on the ScriptRunner machine. And that typically then happens, of course, based on a scheduled approach, where you say, okay, every hour we're going to look at the GitHub repo. Is there a new script that has done successfully through testing and now it's in the production branch, and to make it available here. So this is one of the examples how you can use the scheduled part of ScriptRunner, but it could be anything else, like whatever you want to run and whenever you want to run it. And then you can also configure email notifications, so you get the info if something goes wrong in this process, for example. So this is typically how, let's say, the connection between Git and the local scripts in the ScriptRunner environment is being established.
So we still need to keep the scripts within ScriptRunner so it understands that logic and all that kind of stuff. But there's a very easy mechanism to ingest those scripts, especially being dynamic enough to do that. And so even if the script changes and did the work, but so long as the action was doing all the same parameters and stuff like that, it's not going to break the script, because, hey, the script is going to do, step 1 through 7 now instead of 1 through 5. And so, hey, we're good to go because we're going to change the underlying script, but the action effect will do the same thing. Am I in the same place there, ballpark?
Yeah, and which also means, for example, let's say the script changes in a way that, okay, there is an additional parameter now in the script. Then, of course, the action realizes that, because what we're doing is in real time, when I'm opening an action in run mode, and even in edit mode, we look at, okay, what parameters are available there. And so if they are changed, maybe one parameter got deleted, another one got added, we know that immediately once that script is available and someone starts using it.
That's pretty cool.
All right, so I want to give you enough time to get through the stuff you wanted to cover, and we had a few questions in the chat that I think most of them have been covered in general conversation, but I saw two here that may be relevant. So one person had asked, so scripts that are executed, are they executed in an elevated shell always, or can you elevate on a per job basis? Or, I mean, does that depend on the script, I guess? Well,
this basically depends on the target. So let's say if I'm I want to run a script locally, I can decide how that script should be, in what context this script should be executed. The default would be in an impersonated mode, which means we have a ScriptRunner service in the background that runs as a local system, right? But of course, the targets or the context in which we run the scripts, of course, depend on the credentials. And so depending on that, this is how or this is the context in which then the script is connecting to the backend system. And we have scenarios where, depending on modules, maybe there is a module that needs some specific information from a user profile that's typically that's not available by default. Then you could say, okay, I want to run that in a particular run as mode with this particular user, because that's the only way that, from a central perspective, like ScriptRunner is executing scripts, we can get this information to use that module in the right way.
Okay, that makes sense. I almost hasten to ask you these questions because when I watch, I get the feeling that ScriptRunner has been around for a little bit, and you've come across a lot of different requests from clients and scenarios, and it seems like you're doing the demo to get us through the big features of the product, but nestled below the scenes, there's a lot of choices to customize this product basically to anybody's whim. So, I mean, we could spend hours here going through all the various scenarios and configurations. That's why I want to be cognizant of your time. The one thing that I did see in the questions that was interesting was you had showed off before this idea of filtered, I'll call them filtered lists. So I only want these people to see North American users, or only these people see a certain set of VMs. What about an environment that has a very large list, or a list that might be changing because of the size? Are those lists dynamically created on the fly, or can you like sort of pre-populate them or pre-cache them hourly so that maybe a long user list doesn't take take a long time to build in the interface?
Yeah, very good question. So queries in general play a very important role in this way of simplifying the experience for the user. And of course, as you said, if there is if an AD contains, I don't know, 120,000 objects, we don't want to have the user waiting for 10 seconds or even longer to get stuff back and they see the list being populated. So that's why, for example, I'm always doing that for my cloud queries. I'm always scheduling them. So what happens is we have a local cache that's being updated depending on what you configure. So here in this case, every 2 hours, this query script runs, coming back with the list of my Office 65 users. And so by doing that, if the user opens up the interface, we immediately have the information that's in the cache. And so that's the preferred way, of course, for big local infrastructures, as well as even more for cloud infrastructures, where you want to make sure that, because this is a scripted query and it has to connect to Office 65, it has to get the information and then present it to the user. So this might take, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds, 15 seconds. And so to avoid that, what we're doing here, we have this scheduled approach. We have this local cache. So this information for at least, or the latest from 2 hours ago is available based on the entries that we got the last time we ran that query. And
okay, I think we've covered. There was a bunch of other questions, but I really think that you and Phil, when Phil was asking some of the questions, he hit most of those scenarios. So I would say we're probably at a good point if you want to go back, or maybe Phil's coming on here because he has another question. If you want to go back to your sort of plan of action, feel free to do so.
Yeah, and if I took you off, I apologize. But I think I'm just try and ask questions as I see fit, or at least I see them.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if there are other questions, I would continue with we looked at this Azure example, right? And so we saw, okay, we can simplify the user interface. We dynamically create that user interface. And of course, it all comes down to using the scripts and that's behind the scenes, so to speak. So what I want to show you here is, and the reason why I'm using the ISE is, number one, I still like it actually. And number two is we have a little add-in here that enables us to do some simple check-out, check-in mechanisms for our scripts. And so, for example, I can look at the script that does this execution at the way of the creation of the script. So here again, we see, okay, based on that name of the parameters, that's what you see in the action, right? So which also means if I'm changing something in the script, I'm storing it and I'm refreshing the page, you will automatically see it in the user interface. The same is true if you add parameters and stuff like that. So this is something that really happens instantaneously based on what you're doing in your script.
So are you saying that the ISE plugin that you just had is a direct representation of what's on the runner? So
yes.
That I can modify that script directly and I don't need to do the sync up copy, I can modify the script on the runner directly.
Absolutely. So what you can do here is you can check out the script because I'm allowed to do that, right? So that's why I can do a checkout. I can make some changes. Maybe I don't know. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm removing that. That was pretty silly anyway. So I can, and then I can check it in again, and maybe hopefully I do some good. I'm writing in some good comments here, so that when I'm now opening up the user interface, okay, now it's still here. It says Heiko was here. I'm doing a refresh, and then hopefully we will see that this is now being removed. So that's the way it works. And this little add-in here enables me to check in, check out, and it's by no means any code management solution in the sense of GitHub or whatever, but it might help you if you start writing scripts in a smaller team and you want to make sure people are not messing around working on the same script at the same time. You can use that for using checkout, check-in. We also have, you see here, just as you could do that with other objects, you could say, this is a script that belongs to the Azure team. And if I'm not part of the Azure team, I will not see that as long as now because I'm a global admin, I see all the scripts, but if I would be from the Exchange team, I would not see this script, for example. And I can also see that obviously that has been checked out already by a user, Sandra here. So that's what you can do with that, with this little add-in here. What we'll see in the future, at latest by the end of the year, is that this functionality will become also part of the web user interface directly. So, okay, coming back to this action, you might say, okay, I have now tested it, everything works fine, and now I want to start to delegate that. So because somebody in help desk, or maybe people in the development team should be able to spin up some VMs because they need them for some testing purposes or for QR or whatever. And then here you can start to delegate this action. You can work with different color schemes, and you can decide which groups of people should be able to use that. And once you've done that, now here we have this help desk team. Now if I'm switching roles, so to speak, so I'm not the admin anymore. I'm logged in here as user Tina, just normal domain user, and based on the delegation, this user is able to do whatever has been configured here. For example, creating again a new VM in Azure. And we see that this is an even more simplified user interface. I can select again here my regions and my VM sizes, and then I can start and run it. And so what happens now is that I have this user input. We have the parameters that are part of the scripts by default in the background, and now ScriptRunner is executing the script based on all these parameters. And once that's done, hopefully successfully, we can check back, and we can also look at the dashboard to see what happened there. And the nice thing about this approach is that, okay, we already have a web user interface, which is great, but we can make it even easier, because we could say we want to take this action to create a new VM and make it part of a existing web user self-service portal, for example. So in this case, what you can do is, so each action has a unique ID. So based on this ID, you can just say, okay, I want to integrate this action 158 in this case, which represents the, okay, creating a new Azure VM into this web user interface. So in this case, the user, of course, number one, doesn't need to know anything about PowerShell, and in this case also doesn't need to know that there is some script runner going on in the background. And this could be all kinds of use cases, right? To create SQL data backup, or out of Office self-service portal, or creating VMs or whatever, or starting an onboarding process. So by using this one here, it's really like, it's just, okay, I have some input form, and I'm selecting whatever is necessary to get the job done. I'm starting it, and that's it. No need to know anything about PowerShell. And again, also these activities, of course, these actions, whatever you do here, will end up in the dashboard. So because in the background, the authentication happens exactly the same way as if I would be here in my ScriptRunner portal, which here obviously got successfully built this VM. And so as a result, I see this very technical information. That's because that's how I configured it. You could, of course, configure whatever result message you want to have and you want to present to the user so that they know, okay, everything got created in the right way. And if I'm going back to my portal here and I'm going back to the dashboard, I should see right here that, okay, there was this user Tina, she started this action, and okay, ScriptRunner went out to this Azure target with this credential. This has been the parameter values. So we see the ones that got interactively typed in by the user, plus the ones, of course, that come from the predefined values. And then we see the detailed processing of this action, of this script with the parameters. And so, which also means if something goes wrong, I can go back and analyze whatever has gone wrong here. For example, let's take a look at this one, so see, okay, actually I did some experimental stuff here. I tried to switch from Windows PowerShell to PowerShell 7, which doesn't work because there is still some interactive typing of the credentials necessary at the moment. If you do Teams with PowerShell 7, that's why this didn't work. So all kinds of activities, no matter if it's done by a user, if it's done by a scheduler, or if it would be done by the REST API, all this information ends up here. And so this is kind of the technical information. You can make drill downs to which actions do I want to see. And from, let's say, the more management perspective, you can also have an overview about, okay, we started to use PowerShell and we started to use a ScriptRunner. So what did we actually, what's the benefit, right? How much time and money did we save by automating this stuff with PowerShell and ScriptRunner? And so what you can do is in each action, you can configure what the time that you saved compared to doing this manually. And based on that, we calculate the time and the money. You can configure the hourly wage, and then we can export that. And so typically, this is the things for management, right? To see, okay, which you might want to send out every Friday or every week. So you have an overview about, okay, what's actually going on behind the scenes, so to speak. And maybe you also find out, okay, we're wondering why these exchange actions are used only a few times, because we thought that would be something that happens every day. And then you could start also analyzing this in the background as well. This is also something that helps you to get an idea about, what does this automation really bring you in the sense of time and money. And then, of course, also you have, so I showed you an example of, okay, having manual tasks, scheduled tasks. A typical example for scheduled task is also creating, of course, reports, things like this that you want to send via email to your maybe to you or again to your management or stuff like that. And the other thing then, of course, is enable a third-party system to connect to ScriptRunner. In my environment, I have a PITG monitoring system, and I'm allowing the system to connect. So that's why I said, okay, this machine is allowed to connect, and then it has to authenticate, which is, of course, crucial, because based on the authentication, we check if this machine is allowed to trigger the action, because depending on what credential is being used, that, of course, becomes part of the, let's say, the delegation in the action. And so what you can do here is really enable a fully automated approach of, like in this case, if the sensor detects an error and the solution is run a script to restart a service or whatever is necessary, then of course this happens automatically. In this case, it's a pretty stupid example, but if I'm stopping a service in the background, we are also sending, we're pushing a message into a particular Teams channel, which includes some variable information from the PITG that tells us, okay, what actually happened here. There was a service that has been stopped. And so just as an example, how you can use the connectors. And as I said, every system that is REST-ified, so to speak, you can integrate with ScriptRunner, and then you have this third way of running the scripts, as I said, manually scheduled and using the connectors. And the manual approach also includes, just to also show you that, could be client-side actions. Let's say you want to make sure that you want to provide an easy way for users to clean their Teams cache, because at the moment, I don't know of any button in Teams itself. You have to go to 6 or 7 folders, I think. And so sometimes cleaning the cache is something that really helps to make Teams work again. So what you could do is you could provide an action that says, okay, I click here on I start this action. Now, what should happen if everything goes fine? Teams should be closed, which just happened, and then in the background, the folders are being deleted, and then okay, okay, a little bit fancy, whatever. So coming back with a message here, the interesting part here is, and that's what I want to show you, is that in this case, let me see if I have it here. Is it this one here? Let's see. Yeah. So in this case, we know the IP address of the machine where I just clicked on that action. This is this SRX started IP address information, and in fact, we have quite a number of information. This is just a subset. The list is really longer. But for example, this one here helps you to say, okay, what are we doing here? Okay, somebody clicks on a tile. We know based on this variable, okay, the IP address, we transform this into the host name, and then we're remoting into that machine and doing something on that client. Given that remoting is possible, right? We had the discussion just before we started the recording. It has to be done in a secure way. We know that, of course, but this is the way how you can use that, not just for managing your servers and your centralized systems and your cloud services, but also doing things on the client side. Maybe also pushing out new firewall policies or another cleaning the Teams cache, the DNS cache on a machine and stuff like that. So this helps you to control the behavior of the script. And another thing could be, okay, was it the user, or maybe in other cases, maybe somebody started an action that coming from a wrong network segment, so to speak, and say, okay, if this action is being triggered from this network segment, we're not going to allow that, for example. And so these are the information that you can use for controlling the behavior.
So you're saying at that point, those actions are open to everybody. Anybody can run those actions or that kind of thing. You go to the web page and you click on an action. There's no login, there's no credentialing at that point. It's just these are actions for everybody, an on-demand kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
This happens exactly the same way like the one for Azure. So you need to delegate that action to the users. So in this case, looking at this action here, it got delegated, and because the user that I'm just used here on this other machine, just going back, I think it was Tina who's logged in here. Yep. So here you can see I'm logged in as Tina, and because based on the delegation, these actions are available for this user. So there always has to be an authentication. So there is no way to provide any action without authentication, which is also true for the use cases where you just want to implement something or delegate
so
something.
So is that SSO, or do they have to actually type in their username and password to that? Do they like automatic?
Yeah, so this would, in this case, would be an Active Directory user. So what you can do is, when it comes to delegation, it can be an Active Directory user. It could be an Azure Active Directory user. It could be a claim-based identity, which is being used or can be used if you have multi-forest scenarios and you want to delegate something from a remote. Local identity typically is really just for testing because it's your local user, and basic out is there for particular connectors.
So kind of in that same fashion at this point, I'm going to kind of come back to some of the architecture in the form of that, is that a lot of us are, at least in this group are, hey, we run our scripts and we're kind of managing scripts for other people in that regard. And the idea that, hey, you're running some scripts over here, I'm running some scripts over there, I know that guy will run his scripts. And the idea that, hey, we're putting stuff together and this is kind of like, this can be that centralized place for all that. But then effectively comes who manages all these scripts, and like, hey, if these jobs aren't running, like there needs to be defined a ScriptRunner admin who, coordinates all these kind of things at that point. Is that kind of where we're kind of talking at this point? Because I'm trying to envision that in my organization and just how would I put this into my own organization and is it be a good fit? And then going, well, they all do their stuff and I do my stuff, and like, well, then there'd be an automation ScriptRunner, kind of admin who controls it all, kind of thing. Well, is that how it's been in other organizations?
Well, I think what you're saying is, once you have a solution like this, what's the overhead to keep it running, right? Is it something that can sort of manage itself, or does this become someone's job to manage a console?
Okay, so you will have at least one global ScriptRunner admin who would be there to, for example, create new actions. So because even if you have a script right here, the script itself is just a script, right? Because if you want to use it, you would say, okay, I need to take this script and create a new action out of that, and I decide, okay, from the configuration point of view, who is going to be able to manage that, and then you start selecting the target and the delegation and maybe scheduling and stuff like that. So that is something that has to be done by one or maybe multiple people who have the admin access to ScriptRunner. And if, depending on how dynamic the environment is, of course, to create new actions, this is something that this person would be doing. And or if we're thinking about coming back to this team scenario, of course, you could say, okay, I'm having a new script here, and I make it available for a particular team, and then from there, the people from this team can start creating an action for that, or starting to delegate that. So then you would have kind of a two-tier approach, so to speak. But you definitely would have somebody to really manage that. And what it really depends on, of course, how many new use cases you want to implement, and who's the driving force for that. What we see quite often is that actually the helpdesk people become the driving force of knocking at the door of the admin and saying, couldn't you also delegate this and this use case to us, because then we can provide a better service, and the admins are happy because then of course they don't have to do it in the future. And so, but if we have this scenario, we pretty in a pretty short period of time, we see configurations where they started maybe with 5 actions, then all of a sudden it's going to be 15 or 20, because then for the help desk people typically in step 1, and then maybe also there are some end user scenarios and some connector scenarios, but it typically starts with the delegation to the help desk people. And so coming back to your questions, yes.
So kind of related to that is that how do people kind of get started with that? You know, there's a free trial kind of stuff. Like how does it scale at that point? You know, is it like, you know, that kind of thing? So that's kind of where like pricing and all that kind of stuff. But how does it scale when you introduce it into an organization? What's a typical, you know, granted typical is not a real word, but
you mean for let's say for first implementation and starting using it? Okay. So first off, the implementation and installation itself is of course pretty straightforward. It's done maybe within an hour or something, and then it depends on really the scripts that you want to and the use cases that you want to implement. So what happens typically is that we say, okay, take your top 5 or top 10 most annoying recurring tasks and start putting it into ScriptRunner, because that's the way how the IT admins, the IT pros get the benefits as soon as possible, because then they can say, okay, now I can delegate that to somebody in help desk, and I don't have to worry about the security stuff, and I don't have to teach them any PowerShell stuff. And that is typically something that happens within a couple of days. Maybe sometimes we're also doing the onboarding services together with the customers to get this stuff up and running as soon as possible, and follow the best practice approach. And then from there, they're adding new actions, and they're starting always, of course, with one, but they start with one ScriptRunner machine typically, and then scaling in the sense of having multiple machines. That really happens if you have environments with number one, really a bigger number of actions, and there's distributed infrastructures where you want to have multiple machines. So you don't want to have the US ScriptRunner to talk to your resources in Azure or something like this.
Well, it kind of, we could certainly, defer some of these conversations as far as like pricing and stuff like that to, if you want more information, certainly reach out to ScriptRunner and get some kind of information. But what's the, C-level kind of thing? What do I need to talk to my C-level to say, hey, is this even something that's possible, or is it something that's not possible? How does that structure work?
Yeah, okay. So let me just go to our website, because here you get some basic understanding about the licensing. So we have two flavors. We have an Essential Edition and we have a Corporate Suite. The Essential Edition is typically a good starting point, or if you have a small environment that might be already efficient enough for 5 users. And then the Corporate Suite, that's the one where you can add all kinds of these connectors that we talked about for password servers, for automation connectors. We also have a connector for writing this dashboard information into a SQL server. So because we kind of delete this data after 90 days, if you need to keep that for a longer period of time, there is a particular way of doing that. And so these are in general the two flavors, so to speak. And then it really it depends on the number of users that you would like to start with. Or let's say if you have a priority one having the scheduled execution, then also the Essential Edition might be the right solution. And then of course you could always switch between the solutions or add users or whatever options you might need to do more with ScriptRunner.
All right, so that's good to know, is that I don't have a lot of people who are working with it. It's just a ton of scripts, so I'm not concerned about. It's not by the script run; it's by the people who are accessing the system.
Yeah. So that's what we license. It's really the people who are actively working with our solution. That's the main focus for the solution. Yeah.
Okay.
So Heiko, I have to say, I'm really impressed with the product. It looks fantastic, and I feel like when the group started to ask questions about different scenarios, maybe they're typical scenarios for you guys, but I feel like there's really nothing in the product where we said, oh, if it could have just done that, man, that'd be great. You seem to have some thoughtful solutions for pretty much all the environments that we kind of threw at you. And so that was really great. So there was a few questions that came up recently in the chat that I want to run back through, and they have to relate to, I guess there's some members of our audience that are probably interested in kicking the tires. That's probably the easiest way to say it. They want to run a demo, and they're curious about if I spin up a demo, how much work does it take me to get to what you showed tonight? In other words, what I mean is they're curious about, are action packs included in the demo? Are any of those self-service dashboards? How do those get built? What kind of work is involved to get those set up? Those kinds of things.
Okay. So number one, so if you want to start using it, you go to our website and you just download the 30-day trial license, which we can always extend if you need more time to test. So with the installation, we have a number of sample scripts that you can use. The second step would be, okay, you take the scripts from our action packs to also download that, and depending on if you want, you can have all of them, or maybe you're just interested in a particular platform for your starting to use ScriptRunner, and then you put them onto the ScriptRunner machine and start creating the main thing to make the first steps is really maintain and type or fill in your right credentials and your right target. So let's say if you want to start with Active Directory, which is typically a good starting point, we need to have a credential to connect to AD, and then you can start with using the predefined target for connecting to Active Directory. And then there are, I think, about 20 actions already available there in the configuration for Active Directory. There are also sample scripts that show you things like, which is quite interesting, having cascading queries where you want to lead a user through different steps. Like, okay, first you select the OU, then the next query shows you the existing groups in this OU, and then, oops. Okay.
Oh, that's so the second question is based upon the first answer.
Yes, exactly. So you can configure a search base, and this scenario, of course, means, okay, in this case it's AD, but it could be, first selection could be the vSphere server, second one could be the VMware, a third one would be the existing snapshots, because you want to kind of restore a snapshot, for example. This happens based on the search base, where you say, okay, this is the first selection, and then based on the OU path, that's what then the second query starts, and then the third one starts. This, by the way, is always happening in real time. We talked about the scheduled and cached queries. These ones, of course, because they're really completely dynamic, they are always in real time. Anyway, so these are things that are part of the solution, or of the package when you install it, including also the portal and the statistics and stuff like that. And from there, it's really up to, so to get to this point, it's typically maybe it's a day or something. We also support customers during the configuration phase. We are doing online sessions to guide them through if they have, let's say, just last week I had a session with somebody who wanted to do some very particular stuff with VMware, So we had a half an hour session, and we went through, okay, PowerCLI, how to configure a target to do things with the local VMware server in this scenario. So we help based on the online sessions, but we also have, of course, our documentation that helps with the first steps, which you find right here on our manuals part here, where it really adds. And as I said, so AD is typically really a very good starting point to get some experience and to really see, yes, it works in your environment, or it also shows you that, okay, maybe there is some infrastructure thing not working, so you cannot connect also natively from this new ScriptRunner machine to your AD, then to solve that first, and then adding additional backend systems targets over time.
All right, so why don't we put a bow on this and call it a night? First of all, again, a big thank you to Heiko for spending time with us. It's at a very late or early hour, depending on how you look at it, and much appreciated for you spending time with our group. As Heiko said, you can reach out to him on Twitter or various different social media platforms. He's a very easy guy to get in touch with. He's very active in the community. Follow-up questions, try out a demo. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer all the questions you have. If you're watching this at home, thank you for joining us this evening. If you've never joined us before and you're seeing this on YouTube on the first time, we'd encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com, RTPSUG. We have about a 95 video catalog of all things covering PowerShell. But more than anything, we'd love for you to come and join us in person, and you could be a part of the next discussion. And you could do that by finding us at rtpsug.com or on meetup.com and look for the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. So with that, we're going to say goodnight to everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's been another great meeting. Thank you so much to ScriptRunner, and thank you all for joining us.